Grammar as a habit and not a subject. In the last video, we talked about grammar and vocabulary as a puzzle. Learning a language is like putting together a huge puzzle. In this video, we're going to talk about the difference between studying English as a subject and as a habit. Let's first talk about English as a subject and what that means. When we say learning English as a subject, we are talking about learning vocabulary lists and also studying grammar rules. That is usually the way language is taught in school. Now, this is not intrinsically bad. And my goal is not to bash teachers because most of them are doing the best job they can. However, this is not the optimal way to learn a language. If you scour the internet to find polyglots or people who speak many languages, you will find that none of them primarily learn to fluently speak a language in a school setting. There is a reason for this. The reason is this. Studying English as a subject has more to do with learning about English than it has to do with actually speaking English. Say you were going to learn to ride a bike. As an example, you could go down to your local bookstore and buy several books on how to ride a bike. You might even become the most knowledgeable person about bikes in your community. Now, does this qualify you to race in the Tour de France? Probably not. My goal is not to be harsh, but to stress the reality of such an approach. If you don't believe me, look around at your classmates at school and ask yourself how many have become fluent in English by studying hard, by getting good grades, by spending hours in which you could be doing something more fun than staying up late learning grammar rules. My guess is that this is not going as well as you would have hoped. Perhaps you are one of the lucky few that can study grammar rules and learn to speak English well. If so, I congratulate you. You probably don't need to be watching this video. Now, I'm a Manchester United fan. For those of you who don't know, that's soccer, or football like they say in England. I like Park Ji-sung. He always played great in the most important games. Now, there is another Korean superstar in the English Premier League. Son Heung-min. I already know that every Korean knows who he is. But I have a question for you. Why is he so good at what he does? I'll tell you. I watched a YouTube video a couple of years ago about the training he had to do every day for his father. He juggled the ball for hours a day. He didn't read a book about soccer or attend soccer lectures in school. He trained and trained and trained in soccer until he was a master. When soccer players go out on the field to perform, their previous training takes over. He doesn't have to think about what he's going to do. The discipline he put into his training is demonstrated by his performance. That's why he's a world-class soccer player. Because it doesn't matter if you study the tactics of the game if you haven't practiced the skills relentlessly until you're a master. I realize that some parents are hard on their children for not being able to speak English better. After all, they are spending a lot of money on English academies. It's not the children's fault at all. Because what is happening is that they are being handed a massive puzzle and are being told to put it together by remembering the grammar rules they studied and trying to remember the vocabulary that they learned in the lists. In essence, they are being asked to perform based upon a head knowledge of a subject rather than a mastery of a skill that we talked about in our soccer analogy. In this case, the parents might think, "My kid isn't studying hard enough. He needs to study harder and stop slacking. What's wrong with him? Doesn't he care about his future?" That's not the problem. The puzzle is massive, even overwhelming, a monumental task. This is particularly true when he doesn't have the puzzle box to look at when he's trying to piece together the thousands of oddly shaped puzzle parts. What I mean by this is that the puzzle box is a lot like the grammar rules we studied. The lists of vocabulary that we have memorized. There is no puzzle box in the real world to look at when we need to speak English fluently. It is only when we have ingrained the grammar in our heads that we can speak without thinking or trying to remember what we have learned. This is why, We are going to talk about what learning grammar as a habit means. The fundamental question to be asked is, what does it mean to know grammar? A lot of times we use words, but we don't define their meanings. When we use the word to know here, we mean knowledge as a habit. What do we mean by habit? Because this word defines what the word to know means. Simply stated, to know grammar means that you can speak the grammar without having to remember a rule. It's the same for you when you're speaking Korean. In normal conversation, you don't have to remember back when you learn the grammar rule to be able to say something. It's automatic. I taught in Korea for 10 years, and in Russia for 1 year, and in China for 1 year too. A common thing that the students always told me was, "Oh, Sean, we already studied that. We already know that. There's that pesky define word again." To know. Stephen Covey introduced a very interesting concept in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Begin with the end in mind. If your goal is to fluently speak English like a pro, then the methods you utilize to get you there may have to change. If your goal is to know a lot about English and fill your head with lists of vocabulary and grammar rules, then this video probably doesn't matter. The key is, the performance is in the practice. This will be hard to believe for some of you. But you don't need to learn grammar rules as a subject to be a fluent speaker of English. In future videos, I'm going to show you how to practice grammar to learn lots of vocabulary, and how to use simple vocabulary to learn complex grammar. Now, there are some people to whom this might sound crazy, but I have a question for you. How many babies have you seen with a grammar book in their hand? I thought so. None. When I was in linguistics school, after I graduated from college, we had a class in morphology. Stated simply, this class was about all the forms that grammar could take. I learned that every sentence has a genetic code, or a generative principle. In the next video, we're going to talk about the genetic code of a sentence and how to extract it to be able to make thousands of sentences habitually, based on the one strand of code in each sentence. This is the grammar habit.